people's minds, I think there are these created hierarchies saying art is here, design is here. Those hierarchies are just, to me, nonsense. There's no hierarchy. You just do very different things. It's like having two very different kinds of doctors. Like, somebody who takes care of your health while somebody takes care of your mind. They both are important.
Can art ever be influence-free?
I don't think so. I think
your whole painting about Lakshmi and Alakshmi, I thought that was a very, very interesting take.
With Lakshmi and Alakshmi, it's about paying attention to the obstacles in your life. It's paying attention to, and I feel like that act of paying attention changes things. Like with the Ganga story.
Is there any sort of a technical knowledge or know-how that a person needs to learn to do art the way you're doing it?
On one hand, I said, you can make art with whatever. But there's also this other thing which is...
We spoke about gods and goddesses. Similarly, we have male artist and a women artist. Is life different for both of them as an artist?
If a man decided to become an artist, he would have a lot more trouble than if a woman decided to become an artist. Because it was like...
I think this was a meme that I read somewhere saying that AI can't create art because it can't be jealous and horny.
Yeah.
If an artist wanted to become a Leonardo or a Picasso, what would it take?
I think the path has changed, but still...
Creative Sparkplug is trying to create a black book of creative journeys with people who are practicing some creative aspect in their life or are intrigued about it or indulging in it. See it as an important, if not integral, part of what they do. And we enterprise to document these records so that we can give an insight into what a creative life or a journey is all about to anybody who's intrigued about it. Yesterday's conversation, a friend whose daughter is now going in for higher education and she's a doctor. Her husband is an engineer. She's like, hey, we don't know how to go about this. Why don't you continue to listen to our podcast? You'll get a perspective because I can't really tell you what an artist does or who a graphic artist is or a graphic designer is or an architect is, an interior designer is in a line. They're all overlapping fields of work and there are too many people who've flown from one to the other. There are too many people who don't have a certification but have aced their work. In fact, today morning we were talking about one, right? Known as an architect, but he was actually a civil engineer and way ahead of his times. That being said, so we curate the people that we talk with, because of course both of us are intrigued. Like there's something happening there. There's something happening there. What rocks his or her boat? How did she get there? Or he get there? Of course, the she will occur a lot more in this conversation because we are talking with you. So as long as we find this intrigue in the fact that somebody's had a journey and a story to tell, we want to put that as a capsule of story. That's what we have been enterprising to do. And for us, it's been a learning journey as well, because we didn't know how to start off. So Keshav came and kind of said that, okay, fine, forget the technicality of it. Just just have these conversations. And Rajesh reached out to me and that's how we said, okay, let's start having these conversations and we'll just document it. So we're still learning. I know you for a while, Smru, and I have seen your work evolve. I'm personally a bit biased about your work. So I'll try to have this conversation with minimal bias, because at some point of time I would like to own one. I'll get there though. I mean, I'm like, that is one. Second thing is, I think it's been round the clock a decade that we met the first time. And even then, I came to you out of intrigue of what you do and what leads you to doing what you do. What we see is an artwork. What we see is a painting. But there's a lot more that goes behind the person who manifests it. And that's the side of Smru that we're interested in. I know if I Google you or anybody Googles you, they'll see your art. They'll get a glimpse of it. But what makes you do that? What's been your story? Where did you start off? Where did you meander? Where did Where did you stall? Where did you felt this was the end of it? Where did you feel, oh no, this is where the starburst happened? How did colors change? What in your life influenced what you do? It's a, call it a belief, and this belief is getting re-emphasized over and over again with all kinds of creatives, that we don't see the outcome of a creative individual's work independent of who they are. It's a fabric, and we want to know what material and what the warp and the weft is, where it needs a ruffle they feel, and where it's too tight and strong, and the whole thing put together is a fabric. Makes sense? We still
Absolutely.
So over to Rajesh. Rajesh, my introduction of Smru is she's an artist based out of Bangalore. You just have to type Smru on Google to be able to see the Devis that she manifests. I'm curious about where the Devs have gone, but there are a few Devs as well. But before that, go in and dig in, and I'll piggyback.
Yes. Smruthi, thank you for doing this with us. While I was, like you said, there's a lot available about you on Google. So while I was going through that, I was very intrigued by your art and stuff. So what I found about you so far is you're an artist, a storyteller. You have worked in offices in Bangalore and Delhi. I'm not sure if you own them, but you worked there. You studied in Valley School, and you also did some courses in fine arts from Chitrakala Parishad. You started with graphic design and photography and eventually returned to fine arts. You've also done storytelling, digital art, graphic designing, photography, terracotta, acrylic on canvas, and all of these are your interests. And I think there's a lot more that we would want to know, and how you meandered through all of this. So what's your story been so far? I mean, how are you feeling today? And about this, we'll start with that.
Just to go back to my education thing, I did start doing art extremely young. Like I was very young when I started drawing and all of that, and my parents were quite excited about that, which is rare. And they wanted me to go to a school that also kind of celebrated the arts. So Valley School was great that way because it allowed me to be. And after that, not only Chitrakala Parishad, but also MSU in Baroda. So I studied there as well.
You studied there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I kind of made that shift when I was even younger, where I remember my mother took me to an art show, and she said, well, this is an art show. This is what artists do, see. And I thought it was a bit alienating, because the art scene can be quite alienating. And I thought, no, I want to do art, but I want it to be useful. So I want to do design, right? That's when I realized I wanted to do design. So, but I still liked art, and that was still my medium. So I wanted to study fine art, but move into design. So that was the journey. But turns out much later, I was going to come back into art because there were things I wanted to talk about and the things that I wanted to say. So the motion of coming back into art was only because there was something to say, not because I was going to be an artist, there was specifically something I wanted to discuss. So my journey back into art happened that way. I feel like, because many people ask me that, because mediums have changed, like, art can be done on computers, like, the mediums have changed completely. So they're like, okay, what's the difference then between design and art, right? And to me, it comes down to one thing. It's, you do art because you have to create something that essentially nobody knows they want yet, or is not specifically useful, in the sense it doesn't have a space in this world. You create it because it's going to make its place in the world and then show you who you are, or, show you something about the world, right? Versus design is something that actually solves problems, comes to a very kind of specific end result, all of that. So, art and design, that was the thing, because people tend to get stuck on medium, and they feel like, okay, if you're working on the computer, then it's design. And that's not the case. Art can be done with a matchstick. It can be done with wind, right?
Yeah.
So
you said art is something that the world hasn't seen or hasn't realized that it needs. And design is a problem solving.
Yeah. It's a specific thing. You already need it.
So is design more democratic than art is?
I think both are democratic. Just that they do very, very separate things. I mean, the thing is, because in people's minds, I think there are these created hierarchies saying art is here, design is here, or, something else is here. Those hierarchies are just, to me, nonsense. There's no hierarchy. You just do very different things. Like, you are in charge of very different parts of, it's like having two very different kinds of doctors. Like, somebody who takes care of your health while somebody takes care of your mind. They both are important. They're both doing things, and there's no hierarchy between them, to me at least. I think they both, in an ideal world, should be democratic. Both, sure, but regardless, like with everything else, there is going to be a hierarchy. Hierarchy based on experience, hierarchy based on knowledge, hierarchy based on travel, hierarchy based on intrinsic knowledge of particular areas. There will be hierarchies.
There are always experts in the field.
Yeah, there'll always be experts in the field. But I feel like they handle two very separate things.
Right.
So,
You do both, actually. You do art and you do design, right? And you are also very good behind the lens, right? Now, this being behind the lens, where do you attribute it to? More art or more design?
I think, again, it's a mix of both. Because the craft of being able to do something right behind the lens versus what you're actually going to, what material are you creating by being behind the lens? I think that's a mix of art and craft, right? And art and knowledge, art and design. So I feel like a lot of things that we do will be a bit of both. Like, for instance, it's like you listen to music and then you say, would you call those lyrics poetry? Right? Because it kind of is, right? We feel like, yeah, but it's also just the skill of being able to sing, the skill of being able to create music, right? So all of that, I think, come together. So how much of it is poetry? How much of it is writing lyrics? Or how much of it is, you know what I mean? Yeah. So for me, like, art is like poetry. Like, it's an element that can find itself everywhere, right? You could cook like it was art, right? It just depends on what you're bringing, what you're manifesting. And I think that is where the feeling of art or the feeling of design comes through. It's vague.
It's vague. There's
It's vague,
overlap, right?
Yeah.
There's no crisp line as much as you want to.
Yeah, and people want a crisp line. You want some proper segregations that we can function by. And I think overall there will be, and we do stay in our quarters in some ways. Like, I made my move from design to art. What does that mean then? It meant that I suddenly had to say something that nobody was particularly asking me to say. Like, so then it became artistic because I was going to say these things.
So I'd like to just go back a little and understand. You mentioned that you started very early in life, I mean, at a very young age. What intrigued you towards art or painting, and what was that you were doing early in life? Were you painting, sketching? What was it, and how did it start?
So, when you're in school, for some odd reason, there will be these couple of kids who will then be called artistic because they started to draw, right? And for some reason are good at it. They either have the patience for it or like it enough, or some part of their brain allows them to do this more than something else. Versus somebody getting interested in sports or whatever, right? The thing is, because it is like that, I started to draw, and because that became my identity, right? She draws, and and I was like, yeah, I draw, right? And then that becomes a strong part of your identity. I enjoyed it, of course. I did. It was literally the one thing I enjoyed more than anything else, so it was easy. But as I kind of grew up, and I realized so much about art is not that ability to draw or not, that is just like one thing. But so much of art was about the mind, and in some ways I feel like when you're growing up, that thing of, so many people think, oh, you know what, I'm not artistic. And it's a very early identity that's put on you. And I feel like that's not very relevant, because you could be completely artistic. It's just that maybe you didn't draw. That's all it was, right? Drawing is not being an artist. Like, there's two separate things. But for me, luckily, the path was clear. I did like drawing. I did like working with clay. I liked all those things. My parents, I don't know how they zoomed in on this, because they figured it out. They said, okay, she likes this. She spends a lot of time doing this. I'm also an only child. So, that allows for a lot of personal space, a lot of personal time, and allowed me to be able to draw a lot and paint a lot. I don't know if I would have had that kind of time if I had siblings.
You're a single kid.
So I feel like being a single kid also allows for a certain kind of personal space. Eventually, I went into a hostel and things like that, and I learned to share. So I'm okay. But share a room, share food, share everything.
Unmentioned disclaimer.
Yeah, because it's an assumption. No, they'll be like, "Oh God, these kids don't know how to share." It's true. You learn it.
How did your parents cope with this? Because you're saying that they, in fact, encouraged you, put into a school which was more art friendly.
Yeah.
Which I think is very few schools. Unfortunately, I think they don't.
Yeah.
They're not encouraged in these days. But what was it like? Like, I'm just taking my example. My daughter, who's 5 years old now, she has some painting classes and all that goes on because of some sort of inclination that I am being an architect and having some sort of a business related to design and creativity. She is being pushed towards that and she is interested now. So she's developing that interest from this young age. For you, was it, I won't say forced in development, was it aided in any way or did it just come on its own? And if it came on its own, how did parents did they, what was their background like? Because not everybody takes this very, the way your parents have taken it and encouraged you to go into the art field. So how did that?
I mean, in that way, I think my parents were and are still very, very alternative. In a sense, my father definitely is more conservative, but he was very keen on me following what I was passionate about. My mother, on the other hand, definitely was a rebel, was very kind of experimental with her own life. And so the fact that, like, for instance, when I was really young, I was allowed to draw on the walls, which is insane. Nobody allowed that at that time. It's a very modern concept that people allow that now. But at that time, you didn't allow children to draw on the walls. And I was really wasting that opportunity by just holding a pencil to the wall and running around. I was really young when this freedom was given to me, right? And my parents were like, she'll draw. Like in this, whatever it is, whatever this is that she's doing is something, right? And I remember most people thinking they were insane or didn't care about the house. Like, they're like, or it's going to be detrimental towards their daughter because you're kind of letting her do what she wants, right? And they were like, why is that such an issue, And this whole thing, and so it's a small thing, letting me draw on the wall, right? Like, I would run around with a pencil, but after a while, I wanted to draw something specific on the wall, and I did. And then I wanted to draw, I didn't want it to be on the wall, I wanted it to be on something else, and then I kind of zoned in on that. But they allowed me to grow in that way, where it just starts with something small, but it kind of unfolds. And I feel like with art especially, it is, otherwise it's a barrier you have to fight later. You have to fight that thing, okay, I can do this. I'm allowed to do this. I'm not going to panic about this, right? With me, it was much earlier. I was allowed to do it. So so it's very hard for me to have an outsider's perspective on when it started or how it started. And I think even my parents won't have a clear perspective on this. And my parents also kind of young when they had me. So they're also very young parents. So, there's something very playful about them.
What do your parents do, by the way?
My father is retired now, but he was a geography professor.
Geography professor. Okay.
Yeah. My mother was a filmmaker. And so they're not together. My mother lives in Toronto and my father lives in India. And so she was a filmmaker and she does other things now. But so in a way, she's more in the creative field.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So did some sort of inclination come in from there?
Yeah, definitely.
The reason why I'm asking is because
she's also a writer, so, and I think that also, like, I never saw myself as a writer because I saw like, okay, that's a writer. I'm not a writer. I'm an artist, So for me, it took me a while to break those walls also and say, you know what, I can write and I'm going to write too. So that's something. So regardless of how you're brought up, there will always be walls that you'll build for yourself.
Right.
You'll say, I'm this, I'm not that, right?
This thing that you said about regardless, you'll build walls. When you say walls, are you saying that it's fueled by the innate need for identity?
Yeah. I think so. So, the minute you want to form an identity, I feel like you have to segregate in some way yourself from everything else, saying, I do this. So somehow the silent voice behind I do this is I don't do that, which is actually so unnecessary. Like, it shouldn't have to be that way. But I feel like sometimes you want to get your craft down or something, and you need your mind to be like, this is what you do. And you need that conviction. And I feel like that's why we do that, so that we can, say like, it's like pulling yourself out of the world to be able to concentrate on something and not wondering, do I do this and that, So your brain allows itself to be stupid about other things and focus on this one thing, right? I remember somebody who done a PhD told me that. They said, the feeling about coming out of a PhD is you feel like, man, I've not paid attention to anything else for a very long time, right? That's what it is, I think, that identity forming. You'll be like, you have to sort of build a wall in that way, just so that you focus on it. I think that's what it is.
It's more a definition.
Yeah.
It's crispening of how you get identified.
Yes.
Okay, that brings me back to the fact that I am personally aware that you're both an artist and a designer. The world knows you more as an artist as well. The work that you get, is it equal measure both, or one is more a personal pursuit?
No, now more art.
Now more art.
Yeah, definitely. Not much. There is design work, but the design work that comes is because of the art that I do. They'll be like, okay, we want something like this. We like what you do, so we wanted to do like creating a logo or whatever. It'll still sort of come from the artist that I am, definitely.
So in that case, in you being identified more as an artist, in spite of the fact that you can do both equally well, does it have anything to do with you doing that on purpose, or it just happened? Because there you did not draw a line saying that, hey, I am more artist, I'm less designer.
Yeah.
It's just you living your life. And then this identity that evolved, which said, smooth artist, hey, she's also a designer. Right? And I don't know what.
Quite honestly, though, I was extremely shy of saying I was an artist. I could say I was a designer and relax. Like, what do you do? I'm a designer. That's that.
When was this?
More than 10 years ago.
Hey, I met you then, and you were like, going for your art.
Yeah, but I think you met me in a certain context.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and I think I was in that context. I was like, oh yeah, I'm an artist. But it took me a while to kind of say I'm an artist or embrace that a lot more. I think I was a little shy to say that. But in my mind, I was not shy. Like in my mind, I did not draw that line. In my mind, I was like,
there's no question of capability.
When I want to do this, I'll do this. And when what did I want to say or do? It was based on that. So it was so much. It was only about being shy about how people saw me for a bit, but it had nothing to do with my mind. Like in my mind, I was happy to be both.
I'm hearing what you're saying as the fact that usually there is a lot of resistance within, which is in some sense, what we casually call self-doubt or a question on whether I'm good enough kind of a thing. It's a capability concern. You did not have any of that. So you were absolutely clear. You was like, okay, I just need to start doing it more often. Was it something like that?
I specifically wanted to do something very specific. So it was easy in that sense.
Right.
Because it wasn't about making art. That's too wide. I wanted to do this one thing. I wanted to find hidden stories about goddesses, and I wanted to draw goddesses. It was specific. Now, whether you called it art, you called it design, you called it whatever, I actually had no issue with it. Like if somebody came and said, you know what, that's not actually art, I'm like, sure. Because I don't care. What I do care about is the story. What I do care about is how that story comes through. If that reaches you, I honestly don't care what you call it. The overall package that it comes in. I really did not have I didn't have any concern in that area at all. I think as time passed, the fact that it was, to me, very clearly artistic played a role. And then then I allowed for the label to happen.
Right.
But when I was creating it, I don't think I was concerned about the label. Because, otherwise there's a lot of things, like it's a joke. It's just like, it's nice, but is it art? It's a joke, like that goes around everywhere, right? Oh, that's nice, but is it art? Is it art? Right? That. I did not want to think about that. I was like, I want to do this. There are stories I want to tell. I want to bring to light why these stories are not told anymore, how mythology changed because, how religion changed in that way. I want to bring light to that. So, how I did it, was incidental actually. Like if I was a theater person and if I knew how to perform, maybe I would have used that as it happened to be graphic art because that was my craft. I knew it. So I used that, you know.
So your academics about design, at what point of time did you make the switch from saying that, hey, I am a designer, but I also want to do my, and what led to that? Or you always wanted to be an artist, but wanted to see a design perspective?
I was happy doing design. I didn't think I was going to do art or anything like that. I was very happy doing design. And because the design field itself is so rich, right? Like, there's such incredible creativity and it's just like, it's unbelievable what one can do in the world of design, right? So I was very happy and content there. I did not feel like I needed to do anything else. Again, my identity was a designer and I was very happy with it. But then I was like, if I want to talk about the specific thing, how am I going to do it? What would this be? Like, how would I talk about this? What space does this fit in so that I can talk about it? Right? It comes down to that. Right? Like, if I said, okay, you know what? I just want to tell the stories. I just want to do recordings of telling the stories. Make a podcast. I'll do something, right? So then you decide on how you're going to get this through, right? And I got this through with saying, okay, I'll do it in the world of art because it's a visual medium. I feel strongly about it. That's where my strength is. And I feel like I can lure you into the story by images, and I was more confident about that than anything else, So I was like, okay, I'm going to make the art, and the way I make the art is going to keep you interested about what that art is about. Who are those people that I am drawing? What's the story there, right?
Okay, I'll tell you something which is like an opinion. It's like a baggage. It's a good baggage though. My baggage is that this woman always comes out as extremely sorted. Like even
I'm not. Oh, anyway, sure, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the last 10 years that I know her, she's like, there's a question, there's an answer. If she doesn't know the answer, she'll say, I never pondered on it. And like, it's on the platter, right? And I've seen her meander as well, right? There was an artist, and then my context to her was her previous house. But when I sit here today, I'm not disoriented, but I know there is change. There's something which is more soulful when you first met, and then it moves. Call it, apart from art, your manifestation as Smooth into other things that are yours, right? It gets done up in some way. There are two things that in between I would like to kind of quickly dip into. What was door number? You remember we discussed door number?
Yes.
What was that? What did you have to do?
So a Valley School friend of mine, a classmate, Rohan Tyagi, and me, and one other person, we kind of created this app around the idea of it's like Airbnb but for dinner. So it's like you go to people's houses and you eat a meal with them. Now this is more kind of...
I remember reading this.
Yeah, so now it's kind of more common that people do it. But at that time, it was really kind of a novel idea, and we wanted to make an app so that travelers could find their way into a city and into homes and eat authentic home food. And that was what that was about. I think it was a little ahead of its curve because people are still too shy about having others come into their homes and eat, which I think people have gone past because now there are like chef tables and this and that and that. Like the eating experience has become so wide and it's not restricted to a restaurant anymore. But at that time it was, just years ago. And at least it was in its nascent form. So, the app itself didn't take off. But that's what was the number.
What role were you playing in it?
So I had done a photography project called Kitchen Matriarch. And that photography project was, I had taken photographs of my grandmother, and it's just her cooking, but it's just processed pictures of just her cooking and how her measurement was her hand. That's it. That's the measurement. No spoon, no this, no that, just her hand. It'll be how many ever of those, right? So there are certain ways that my grandmother functioned, and this is my mother's mother. And she is an incredible cook. Like, she is fantastic. And so I'd done this whole project around her and around food and her. So once I'd done that project, Rohan and me were talking about that project. And they said, wouldn't this be nice if other people could experience that?
Yeah.
They could come into your
Yeah.
house and eat with your
Like,
grandmother.
I'm intrigued. I want to do that right now.
Yeah. So, so it's
I've
like,
always wanted to do that.
yeah. And so then you're like, oh, we should, maybe we should do this. And he was more from the tech world. Like he works in Amazon now, but he was more from a tech world. And he was, he thought about it through apps, right? Like in the sense, so I'd done a photography project, but he could think of it as an app. So it was like, okay, actually, this is a damn fun idea. And then we did it for a while. There were lots of fun dinners that we had. There was one performance dinner, I remember, where a person told stories and there was dinner happening. So there was like such a range, And that was such a fascinating time, actually.
So interestingly, what I see is, we spoke about it years ago. I don't know when, but I remember we having this discussion, and on, I think, 2 occasions we were supposed to have come down on weekend. It was you curating it at somebody's place, and we were talking about, this is years ago. When my beard was black, I think. But I also, you spoke about a collaborative thing you were doing in Germany, Berlin.
Yeah. So that was a different.
Was it at the same time?
No, the collaborative thing with Germany happened a little later. Much later, actually. That was a performance thing that I was doing.
Because I'll tell you where my head is going to. I also feel that you're great with taking somebody else's expression without taking it away from them. Great with working alongside with somebody else's expression. Because that's what my memory of you from when I was doing the photography thing as well. We were 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah.
We were all different people from different walks of... I don't remember the others, incidentally. And I don't think so. What I took away from that curriculum, you worked with me for some reason and you worked with the other person equally well. And we were different.
Yeah.
Right? So is that an aspect of you that you see?
I think the teaching aspect is interesting because it always allowed me to kind of illustrate to myself what I knew so that I could use it myself. Otherwise, it can be quite vague in your head. So with the photography thing, what was really nice was I was working with games, right?
I remember
they
that.
were games.
Yes.
And we were going to learn framing or just learn to see differently and all of that only through games, through a series of fun, quick exercises, right? But they're kind of gamey. And I think it worked personally for everybody because it's like any kind of game. You bring yourself to it. You're not being told what to do. You're saying, these are the general rules. Now do what you can. Now or have fun with it, right? So I think that's why it seemed personal because everybody brought themselves to the game. And I think that was the fun thing. And otherwise, the truth is that I don't collaborate as much. I don't collaborate with people. With my art itself, it tends to be quite personal. With the Germany thing, what it was I made this tarot set of these goddesses.
I was going to that.
Their vahanas, their vehicles, their attributes. And I made a tarot set of that. And through this tarot set, we were going to tell stories. So, for instance, I can sit here and be like, okay, I'm going to tell you stories about whoever. But I have had this belief that, and it has illustrated itself so many times to me, that stories reach you at a time. They come to you because you're open to them at that point or whatever. But like, for instance, I'll have a book for 10 years and then I'll be like, you know what? I got to read that book and I'll pick it up and it'll be the perfect timing for that book. Like, how did that happen? Right? Is it my brain trying to make patterns or is it just the world is constantly conspiring to aid my growth? Like, it's ridiculous. But I do believe that stories reach you at a time. Stories reach you for a reason, or stories reach you because something else is at play, right? So with the tarot thing, it allowed, like, if you sit down now, I'll have you guys pick cards. And when you pick cards, I'm not telling you stories randomly now. I am telling you stories you have picked. Like, these are specific stories that are already yours, right? And I felt like with stories, that's a beautiful thing that I wanted that feeling to come to because that's the truth, is that story is yours. It existed by itself. It has a life of its own in the universe as it traveled. But when it came to you, it became yours, right? So that's a very personal kind of thing. And I feel like it was the games and the photography thing too, is that. I think like they're games, they exist. But the minute you came into it, it became yours, right? So for you, it was like, that game is yours. And you're just like, is that game his too? Like, this is working out for him as well? How wonderful. But, but it'll never be the same game for the two of you. It just won't. because it's you and him. You'll never create the same thing. I could tell you both the same story, but you'll never listen to the same thing. What you take away from that story is going to be entirely different, right? And that's with the same material, right? So I think that's the idea of it feeling personal, I think, because we are personal, right?
I just wanted to go, I mean, I'm sorry, I've been going back and forth with your childhood, but I'm very intrigued because, like you mentioned, that in a class of 40, 50, whatever, there is barely one or two artistic kids who come out of it and who take that seriously. So because in today's time, I'm not sure how schools treat the kids, because probably they're a lot more open and this is the curriculum that they work on. But back in our times, if you were different, you were not good.
Yeah.
And you were supposed to fall back in line. You had to follow the line. You can't deviate from there. Was there any, and thankfully for you, you had parents supporting you. A lot of us back then, even with that inclination towards a creative side, with the lack of support from the family members, life was very different. So how did you see, or how did you overcome all of that? Was it because at home you had the support, but back in school, was it, when did you go to Valley School? How did that treat you?
Going to Valley School was the whole thing that changed that. So first of all, I wasn't in a class of 50, I was in a class of 15 to 20, right? So we were very few. So it was, it was really a wonderful way to grow up. So I think going to Valley kind of, that it was nice because all of us were sort of unique. But having said that, when I look back at school and I go back and when I meet my old school friends, and they're very close-knit, the one thing we do remember is that we also did the same thing. We also created gangs and little groups of friends, and, the same thing that children do everywhere else, where there will be the other. All those things happened, right? But luckily for me, I was accepted for who I was. I had close friends who also were interested in different things. And, I did not face that problem at all. I was not the other. That, I was kind of definitely accepted and, all of that. But having said that, I remember as a child, I really wanted to fit in. It's not like I didn't work towards that. I wanted to fit in. I did not want to stand out. And already, when you're growing up, you feel like, oh my God, like I definitely stand out, no matter how much, because we are intrinsically unique. That's going to happen, right? But there's always going to be that fear about, do I want to stand out too much? I don't want to stand out too much. I just want to exist. Like, I don't want to catch attention, So what was really interesting actually is that in school, theater happened to me. And theater really broke that in the sense and we had fantastic theater teachers. A couple of them had come from Broadway and stuff, like, there were teachers from everywhere. And we had these incredible theater teachers who were working with children. I mean, I can't tell you how lucky we were. And I think, at that age where you're such an embarrassment to yourself, like you hate yourself. Like you walk into a room and people accidentally turn around and look because you walked in, you feel like, I want to die, like you don't want to exist, right? And you just want nobody to look at you ever, right? But at that time to do theater was so nice because it just took that anxiety away. It just took that away. It was fine. It was fine, because that age is a difficult age. And I think that's the age where identity really starts to edge in, right?
You talk about preteens, teens.
Yes, preteens, teens, right?
Because
rough time. When people keep talking about how wonderful their youth was, my youth, I had a wonderful childhood and everything. But they're always talking about how they want to go back to it. I don't want to go back to that. Like, it's pretty stressful also. Like, in the sense, I think with every passing year, it's less of that. You're more and more relaxed. But at that time, to have theater was this, almost like somebody gave me a shortcut. Put me in at another age where I could have the comfort of another age at that age when it was going to be very difficult. So I think these things that happened, which is both the theater and the art, and they happened. At one point, I remember wondering whether it was theater that I would do or art that I would do, because they're compelling parts, they're compelling on their own, and I definitely didn't think I could do both. And so I always wondered, would it be this or would it be that, But theater, I think, made that change for me. It allowed me to be, confident is a very limiting word. It wasn't confidence. It was something nicer, It was just being able to really enjoy whatever was going on with me and the things around me, And I remember, at one point, my mother said that, and I remember thinking, yeah, that's true, is that I had always been keen on happiness. Like, in the sense, I was not somebody who would be comfortable with prolonged sadness. Like, I was very interested in happiness, and I accessed it, and it was the predominant feature in my life, and I wanted that. This can be kind of a strange way to grow up too, when you have a pressure within yourself to be happy all the time. That's abnormal, and that's strange also. And I don't think it's to be that compelled towards happiness is the right thing either. But I think all these elements like art and theater allowed me to at least want it. Allowed me to at least kind of take it when it happened.
Because see, what happens is a lot of kids, while they're growing up and they want to fit in, they let go of a lot of things which probably are something which are unique to them.
I know.
But just because to be fitting into something, they let go of that. And later in life, they realize that, okay, maybe, a lot of them, some of them, very few of them are able to pick it up even back much later in life, because it probably is the, like some sort of spark that's always been there, and that just picks up and becomes a fire. But most of them, the fire just dies out just because they want to fit in.
Yeah. And I've always felt this. I felt like whatever is unique about you is busy working against you and for you.
Come again?
Whatever is unique about you, depending on how you take it, is busy working against you or for you. Like, in the sense, it'll be your aid, and it can also be the stone in your shoe.
But that also depends on the
space that you're in.
The space that you're in as well.
Hold. No. I want to contextualize this. Give me an example of this in your own life.
Okay, as an adult, I must say. As an adult, not wanting children worked against me. Worked against me in so many ways. Because relationships I was in, my partners would have wanted children. My ex-husband wanted children, right? So, but not wanting children is part of my identity, which caused me a lot of pain because I had to be true to that, which meant that there were a lot of relationships I could not keep or be a part of, because, that's a crucial part of a relationship, right? And it's not fair for either partner to ever have to give that up. You want children, you should have children. You don't want children, you should not have children. Like, that swap, I feel like, is always going to be a difficult one. And I was not keen on making anybody crossover also. But not wanting children also allowed me to live the life that I have lived, which is really so wonderful. And I'm so happy with it. Because and a lot of people said, oh, is it because you don't have children that you could do this, this, and this? Or is it because you don't have children that the reward was that and I said, no. The reward of not having children is not having children. That is the reward.
True.
That is it. You're not going to get an added reward for not having children, because the reward of having children is having children.
Yeah.
You're not going to get an added award for having children, right? That's it. That is the award. That is the act, right? So in that way, what worked against me also worked for me.
I'm trying to see it through my own lens, right? I relate to what you're saying as a personal experience. I don't think so. What you're saying is so outer worldly that a person can't relate to it. It's everybody's story in some sense, right?
We all have that thing in our life. Yeah.
So I think, to add on to that, I totally believe what you're saying, and also it's all on us. Whether, and also the space that's around and the strength that we have within ourselves, because like you said, it will work for us or against us. And whether we are letting it work for us or against us is based on what we do for ourselves. So if we are able to identify that uniqueness about ourselves and stick to that, like...
Yeah, because otherwise you will question it.
Yes.
Right? And constantly you'll question it, right? And I feel like so many times when people are doing pros and cons, right? Like, for instance, my mother wanted me to immigrate to Canada. And I went and I wanted to be in India. So, but later on, a friend of mine was immigrating to Canada, and he was like, okay, let's look at the pros and cons. And he wanted to have the conversation with me because I just come back. I said, okay, let's look at the pros and cons. And then I said, you know what? The truth is that with me, I've always gone with that feeling. I've gone with the feeling because I can trust that. I wake up in the morning, I'm stuck with that feeling. It's very hard to get up in the morning and start with pros and cons. It's damn exhausting, right? You have to get up in the morning and be fine with whatever choice you've made, right? But having said that, while you're making that choice, it's damn hard because, there's so much self-doubt. You're thinking, am I doing this? Because everybody's saying that other thing is right. Everybody's saying that's the way to go. Everybody's saying you'll regret it. You'll regret it, right? And then I told myself that, okay, I'm going to make one little rule for myself. I won't be able to stick to it, but I'm going to really try, is that I'm going to try and not operate from fear. Fear of losing out, fear of regret, all of those things. I don't want to operate from that fear of regret, right? Because imagine doing something so compelling and life-changing because maybe you'll regret it in the future. That's just, to me, insane.
Yeah.
Like, that's a crazy ask, Regret it now. Yes, do it then. If you feel like, oh my God, this is something that I want to do it, right? But maybe because for me, it's been an easy thing because in my mind, my choices have always been encouraged and, think I've been okay about it. I think it'll be much harder if one is in doubt, right? When you're thinking, I really don't know. I don't know which one is better. I can't tell which one is better, right? I know that is difficult. And I've also been through that, those moments of complete self-doubt, wondering whether I'm doing the right thing and all of that. And also trying to make narratives that make it work, saying, this is my story. So this is me, right? To hold on to narratives, you do whatever. But whatever I've done, either creating narratives for me to explain myself or do this or do that, I've just gone on the simple feeling of knowing that was for me or that was not for me. And I remember meeting this wonderful woman in the Philippines. And at that time I was married and I met her. And that time, of course, people my age were having children. And then she said, and she was meeting me for the first time. And she said, do you have children? And I said, no. And then she said, oh, yeah, it's not for everyone. And she had 2 children. She's a fantastic mother. And she said, oh, it's not for everyone. So, take your time. And I was like,
Yeah.
So I've been lucky in many ways. And she became a very dear friend. I've been very lucky to have that where it's never you make a choice because you're fighting another choice. No. Both of us can sit here. You make the opposite choice. And it'll still make sense,
In some sense, I'm internalizing whatever you're saying. And this whole thing about choice that you said, right? That when you make a choice, when you want something and go for it, exercise that choice. Your gift is what you wanted. Right? There's no addition. There are no bonuses to that.
No.
Right? And it won't come with interest or something like that.
No.
At the same time, by virtue of making the choice, there are a few things you tend to, the choice doesn't sound it, but there are a few other things you've chosen not for, right? So would it be too much for me to even assume that an exercise choice comes with the gift of fulfillment or contentment or even elation for that matter, because, hey, I really wanted this, I worked for this, and this is what I wanted and I got it. This sense of being victorious, this sense of being, this is what I want. I got it. At the flip side of it, there will be a sense of guilt or regret, any of the two. That is an accompaniment.
I think they can all exist. I think so. In the sense, like, just because it doesn't happen specifically in that way for me, I am not somebody who spends too much time with guilt and regret or things like that that much. Because I feel like if there is something I'm feel guilty about, I really try thinking about what can one do, right? In the sense that I feel like sometimes, guilt can be very comforting because you don't have to actually do anything after that. You can just be feeling guilty, right? Regret can also be comforting because it's a thing in the past. I can just regret it and just be in that space, right? But if you don't allow yourself that much, then I feel like a call to action is much more compelling. What can one do, right? In the sense, what about my present is so, what about my present is so hard that it's making me regret the choices I have made, right? So far, that hasn't happened. When it does, I'm sure I will come up against it where I'll feel like I really shouldn't have done that. That feeling. Uh, but I don't know. I feel like your own life and the present place you're in is so filled with drama anyway. Like it's quite absorbing. It's really quite absorbing. Like there's so much going on. I have to create art. There are people I like. I want to spend time with. There's so many elements to my life and just fascinating and insane and all kinds of people in it. It's like it's filled with so much that I feel like it takes all my attention. It really, it takes a lot out of me to just be here in the present. In the sense, it's fully taking me. So to add that layer of other stuff, should I have done that then or should I have done, that becomes hard. Like in the sense, I feel like, okay, but what do I do now? I come back to that quite quickly, and I'm not saying that I'm not without regret. I'm sure there are things that might have turned out differently, might have been damn nice also. Who knows? Just this morning, actually, weirdly enough, I was thinking about this because I watched this Black Mirror episode yesterday where there's alternate universes where you've taken different choices and, and there's this girl who's happily jumping between these multiple universes. And I was thinking, what am I doing in these other universes? Right? Like, and I was like looking at all the choices. I said, oh my God. So in one universe, I've done that. In another universe, I've done that. Right? And I felt kind of interested in them. Like I was curious about them, but not anything else. Like in the sense I was fully interested in knowing what those choices felt like or what that meant. And it was interesting and I wanted to know more, but nothing close to wanting that.
That brings me to inquire, at this moment of time in your life,
Yeah.
do you feel content?
No, not yet. I don't even think I'll get there, by the way.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
But I think I'm still part of some journey,
Yeah.
So I feel like, no, definitely not. Like I still have a ways to go, but not to feel content. I still have a ways to go for all the things I want to do. And ideally, the contentness will come in little bits and pieces as I do them. Like little rewards, right? Like that's the fleeting feeling of being content or happy will come and go. But no, I don't think so. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what the problem is with the word content. It feels like it's not forward propelling. You know what I mean? Like if you're unhappy, you'll do something about it. You will get up and do something, right? But if you're content, the chance of getting up and messing it up are light, right? So I'm in a place where I have that element of contentness, which allows me to relax a bit, but it is not so I'm not scared to push forward and risk losing the happiness I have.
Just to give an example, so my grandfather, I think I don't know whether he even knows the meaning of content,
right?
But he retired at the age of 50.
Yeah,
and that's it. He's done nothing after that. He's just been living from morning to evening. That's it. Nothing else. He does his daily chores, and that's about it. There's nothing. And to him, he is. I've
learned that from my father, by the way.
So
same thing.
So we don't look at it like he's content and stuff, but that's what he is, and he's never moved beyond that.
Yeah.
That is what his life has been for the last 40, 45 years now. He's 90 plus. And versus, say, like you mentioned, your dad, who's, even though he's retired, there's so much that he wants to do. There's so much that he's doing. I think that's probably what content does or doesn't. I'm sure your dad is also very happy with what he has and where he's reached.
Yeah.
But that full stop is what is not happening.
Yeah. And why does it need to? Life is going on.
Yes.
Right.
Because a lot of people, they understand content as that, okay, now this is a full stop point for me.
Yeah.
But I don't think that should
I'm done with it.
Yeah. I don't think that should be.
Yeah.
Because you can be content but still keep moving on.
Yeah.
You can be
still
content with one.
Right?
Yeah. So it's like these multiple lines that are there. This has reached its limits, but the next is not. So you keep moving.
Yeah. That next thing is climbed also. Like, you'll be like, oh, it's there. I must say one thing though, and that's something I noticed about myself that happened for most of my life. And that's something I'm trying to be aware of now. And it's damn hard, which is I'll want something. And then when I finally get it, I've already started wanting something else, right? So I'm already my mind has already moved on to something else, right? So that thing that I wanted, that I've gotten, I'm experiencing it, but my mind has already gone to the next thing. So that's why I feel like I can't claim to be content in the way that people truly enlightened are.
You saying you're content doesn't really mean you don't want anything more in life.
Exactly. It's like I can be content and have lots of desire.
Yeah. It's a coexistence of this idea that seems to suggest it's done with, but no, there are more desires.
There are more, there's still stuff. Like for instance, but like I feel like age is a beautiful thing that way, because with every passing year, these things get sorted out a lot more. Like that's what I've gotten from my father. Like when I came to live close to him, the biggest gift he gave me was re-illustrating what time looks like, because he lives in slow motion, right? So you just like everything's happening at its own time. And I remember when I first came here, I was just like, oh my God, this is too frustrating to watch, like because everything is so slow, right? And then I kind of changed, because I realized the benefits of that slowness, the benefits of that time changing. And, and he changed time for me. What a gift, right? It's an incredible gift to give someone. And I met my granddad on my mother's side, and he is 90 plus, walks 10,000 footsteps a day, man. It's okay. It's unbelievable. But also, he hasn't got much else going. He walks. He's got all day to do these 10,000 footsteps, but still he does them. And I was asking him how he is doing. And then he was like, oh, with age, the one thing you have to learn is you don't hold anything too tightly. You have to hold everything softly, because that's what age will do. Because it'll teach you how many things are going to go, that you will only hold things softly. You don't hold them. And I remember thinking, I can't wait to feel like that, right? So I'm nowhere there. I'm holding things damn tightly now. Like when I want something, I want it.
I can't imagine
when I love it, I love it. I'm living it and enjoying it. And, a good meal is a good meal, all of that is still happening. And so that's why I feel like content is a very big word. Versus, I feel like with age, that's a wonderful thing that might happen. I don't think it'll happen for everybody. Didn't happen for my grandmother, but for my granddad, it happened. So,
It's interesting that we are discussing topics that always seem to have two dimensions to it in some sense. Contentment as perceived in a conversational ways seems like, oh, I'm done with it. But we are talking about contentment, wanting more.
Yeah.
Right? We are talking about wanting something and being an acknowledgement of the fact that the very act of wanting something has a choice of not wanting a few other things.
Yes.
And that doesn't really need to get into regret or guilt. But even if it is there, it's okay. It's a part and parcel of experiencing the joy of acquiring, achieving, or making a choice that is about me. So they're like multi-dimensions in concepts that seem to be very, very binary, right? In the way that we use it. Tell me something. Your whole painting about Lakshmi and Alakshmi, I thought that was a very, very interesting take. Whatever we are talking right now, does it, in some sense, is it synonymous to your intent of making Alakshmi as important as Lakshmi? Or actually, in some sense, bringing Alakshmi out of the closet and saying, hey, she coexists in equal measure and import with Lakshmi that everybody seems to know.
In the same body.
In the same body as a dimension as well. Yeah.
So, I think those kind of things, and I think they're like when I was growing up, we have this festival here. I mean, it's still there, but I'm not as aware of it now. But there was the sweet that we gave each other, which had neem flowers in it, right? So it's a sweet, but it's also got this neem flower.
Yeah.
So you'll get a hit of that bitter, right? And it was a New Year's gift that we gave, and it was a reminder that the coming year is going to have both sweetness and bitterness, right? It's so simple and such a cliche, and you just feel like, okay, yeah, I get it, like because you've grown up with that. But I feel like that's really where it's at in some ways. That's that it's not about accepting the bitterness, but paying attention to it. Because I feel like that's what it is. It's not suffering it, but it's paying attention to it. Like with Lakshmi and Alakshmi, it's about paying attention to the obstacles in your life. It's paying attention to, and I feel like that act of paying attention changes things. Like with the Ganga story. The Ganga
Yeah.
story is her coming down from, she was Akash Ganga, Mandakini. And then she came down and became the river goddess, right? But her idea of coming down and Shiva having to stop her fall because she was going to destroy the world that she was going to come into. But her fall being stopped by an obstacle and then her having to persevere through it and then still come out and hit the ground, and for all that to happen. I feel like that kind of story has multiple things going on, right? The fact that your obstacles are important, pay attention to your obstacles, right? And because what you are at the end of it is because of the obstacles, right? Because that's what like, for instance, I wouldn't be the artist today if I didn't suffer in some way getting there. I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for the truly compelling experiences that I had, which were not very nice sometimes. But I feel like that's when you pay attention, right? Like, that's how life lessons are taught, by really harsh methods. That's when you pay attention, right? Because I remember my mom told me this once, where I was going through this prolonged depression. And she said, you know what? Nobody likes your depression. You don't like it. Your friends don't like it. Your family also doesn't like it. But the truth is, it's that part of you right now that is so incredibly honest, because you are seeing and experiencing something that you can't cover up. You can't walk away from it saying, no, it's fine, or I'll get over it, or whatever. You are sad, right? And I feel like that is such an honest part of you, right? And you're treating it like an outsider, right? It's almost like your depression has no friends. It's like you're treating it like it has nothing to give you, while in fact it's filled with knowledge. It's filled with visions. It's filled with I don't know, so many beautiful things. It is filled with stuff that's going to connect you with everybody else, right? Don't treat it like an outsider. Don't wait for it to go, And of course, at that time I was like, sure, but I really wanted to go. When you're in depression, it's very hard to be open-minded about it. But I feel like it's those kind of things that kind of made Alakshmi and Lakshmi concept happen and all of that.
When you're going through all of these, how did your work or your expression, whatever you chose to express it as, manifest itself at that point of time?
Luckily, through stories.
So
What happened was, because the stories existed and I was going through something, and then I found the story and I was like, oh my God, this is definitely a story about me. No, it wasn't. It had nothing to do with me. But, it existed for thousands of years without me being involved. But I think finding those stories, seeing seeing my reflection in it, allowed me to then be able to create from it.
Right.
Because otherwise it's so complicated when it's inside you, right? It's really just a mess. But a story allows some clarity, some linear narrative to these complex emotions that we feel.
Is art ever free of personal influences?
I think it's mostly personal influences. I think that's what I think.
Anybody's, like, probably that's the difference between design and art, where design is done for something specific and it can be influence free, but can art ever be influence free?
I don't think so. I mean, even with design, sometimes I feel like, on the whole, I'm skeptical of like pure objective thought that way, that, that I can think about something without putting myself in it at all. Like, I feel like we will always bring ourselves to that. Like, let's say something like the news, which is supposed to be completely objective and not give us opinions and this and that. But the act of bringing us certain news is already a subjective choice, right? Because you can't bring us everything. Then fact that you are even addressing something, or you're going to talk about something, even if you don't put yourself into that narrative or give your opinion on whatever you're talking about, the fact that you're talking about it or the fact that you're bringing it to light is a subjective thing. It's a personal choice that you're making. So I feel like in any kind of thing, with any form of art or otherwise, it's very hard to keep ourselves out of it, I think. It'll always be because it's us.
But do personal life incidences create the art, or the art creation is already there, but what comes out of it is affected by the personal circumstances at the time of creating the art.
I'm not sure how it works for everybody, but I know, and I've seen this happen to other people also, is that art becomes a requirement between you and the things that happen to you, right? It
Mhm.
becomes a thing that makes sense of why life is happening to you, because you can now create art or make movies or tell stories or write a book, right? The because life is happening to you and you have very little control of the kind of things that will come at you or with you or whatever. But life is happening. And for me, at least, art was that thing that either made sense of the intensity with which things were happening, it made sense of it. But in many ways, it protected me, I think. You know, it was there between me and the things that were happening. It, I don't know, brought reason to, otherwise, it was such chaos. But why things happen? Like, why is this happening to me? What, there's no reason really. Uh, Art allowed for some sort of reason because it allowed me to make sense of the world. Allowed me to make sense of what was happening at any point. And I don't know how I would have engaged with the world if I didn't have that, because it's just so intrinsic to me.
Is there any sort of a technical knowledge or know-how that a person needs to learn to do art the way you're doing it?
So I think on one hand, I said you can make art with whatever your skill set is, right? You can use anything. People use found objects to illustrate a point. So anything can be used. But there's also this other thing, which is material, right? What is the material? And so much of the art is the material that you're using. It kind of rests on that, right? Like, for instance, with me, because my craft was good in graphic design and the graphic art was an extension of that. But the goddesses, I also, in many ways, I needed them to feel like they were from old calendars, or like, that they were kind of useful at one point, right? Like something about it needed to feel like that,
Yeah.
right? So then the material becomes important. The choice of why I've used that becomes key. So I think in a lot of art, the material you use is part of the story. There's a reason why you've used that to tell that, right? And you can see that with many different artists. So I feel like, yes, and if material becomes important, then your craft becomes important, because then your ability to be able to use that material will allow for articulation, right? Like, for instance, I'll want to draw something, it's in my head, but the act of drawing it really is trying to go as close to what's in my head, but it's its own journey, because the act of drawing will take its own thing. So the final work is going to be a mix of what was in my mind, what I was able to create, and why that journey went that way. So, so it's like, it's not reproduction from what's in the mind. It is a journey with it. Like, say, with photography, maybe it's more instant, because it is that, but it's photography. It's the amount of time you're spending on that, and it's years of framing, years of knowing how to tell that story that allows you to take that picture that seems instantaneous, but it's not instantaneous. It's years of practice. It's years of waiting and finding that thing. So, so the craft is important because it allows you to be able to tell your
But
story.
how important is it to know the technical side, like scale, proportions? When you're drawing human figures,
Right.
there is a particular size and the scale and proportion the whole body is.
Like, okay, so for instance, like, there was so much art created in history, right, where there was no perspective, right? Perspective came in at a later point. There was no perspective, but art was being created, right? Cave paintings are beautiful. They tell an amazing story, and that's really bare minimum. There's no perspective. There's no nothing. So then, but it's telling of a time of a people that use no perspective. And why did they not use any perspective, right? Like, there is the idea of God's vision, right? So you created art in a way that God saw it. So you only kind of allowed yourself to only see things in a certain way. But if you added perspective, that made it human, and it was not considered good, which is like the human perspective is too base, while the God's perspective is so
Lofty.
magnificent and lofty that everything is equal in its eyes, right? So in that sense, just an element like perspective has been through so many journeys, right? So in that sense, the craft you use, the way you use it, the elements that you use will always tell a story of why you're telling that, why you're choosing that form of expression, right? Because you're saying, I want to use perspective. What does that mean? I want to use this. What does that? I want my art to be realistic. While somebody says, I want my art to be so almost childlike because my thoughts come through best when I draw it in this way, right? And then and that communication is perfect because they've drawn it in that way, without perspective, without this, without other things, right? So in that way, I think it depends on how you use those elements, right? Because there's great art without stuff. There is great art with those elements, right? Both are possible. So I feel like, I remember at one time, I thought, really learn how to draw, because then you can choose to walk away from that skill and choose another form of expression and all of that. Like that is also true. But many times I feel like, the way I draw and the way I paint might be because I chose this particular way of going about it. It was not like I mastered everything there was to master and then came to this. No, this was an interesting way for me. I went that way, right? That made sense. So I feel like for a lot of people who are learning and who are kind of vague about what they might want to create, I feel like then focusing on the craft of it is a damn good idea, because then you feel like, okay, I can get into this, because the act of drawing is so meditative that, it's like reading. You have to switch so many things off in your mind and be able to do this, sit and draw and then kind of push yourself to be able to communicate through that. We're saying, okay, I want to draw that chair, right? Now I'll sit and I'll draw it. Now I want it to really be as close to what I see in front of me, right? So what does that thing? So I feel like the process of doing that is very interesting, because it just pushes you. At the end of it, whether that thing looks like the chair or not is incidental to me. That's not important. What is important is how much of you was in it and what was going on when you did it. Then the creation of art is not so much about what you produce as much as it is about what you see, right? But then the final thing should tell me what you saw, right? In that sense, how you saw it, right?
When you were in school and moving to college and stuff, did you see yourself becoming an artist? Because back when we were in school, one of the things that was always was about earning money. So how did you link art with the earning money part of it, or somehow this fell in place?
No, that's why I did design in some ways, right? Because I felt like that was definitely a short way of being able to engage with the world and it being able to take care of me, right? And I knew that I wanted to be self-sufficient and be able to stand on my own feet, and that was important, which meant that I should be able to make this work.
Right.
And art would definitely be a gamble in that world. And design seemed, for other reasons, I also just liked design. And I was anyway drawn to that. So it was simple. I didn't do it simply because it made more sense. I actually liked design. I liked the problem-solving nature of it. I liked how it pushed me. Even today, I do design projects because nothing makes me sharp the way a design project does, right? So there is something about design which is really fascinating. But, it was also a way to be able to be independent. And being independent really is tied up with being able to take care of yourself financially. I think there's a good portion of it that's tied up with being financially independent.
You're talking about design per se.
Yeah.
Right. You did design to be able to kind
do
of
that,
go towards financial.
So when I did do the art project, like when I started doing art, I wasn't desperate to
Earn
make
money.
that. It didn't hinge on that, which allowed me to express the way I wanted to and kind of play around a lot more, because there was this other thing that was happening. So I had that freedom because of that journey that I took. But a lot of people go into art, do art, hope to survive by it, and survive by it, and some are extremely successful. So but regardless, it'll take time. It'll take definitely a vision. So, those things.
You do painting, you do graphic design, you do digital art. You are also into storytelling. Are all these interlinked in any way? Are they the similar medium, or are they very different? And how do you meander through all of this?
I think they are connected in some way, essentially because, well, it's still me doing it. So I think that comes through. It's like I'm not schizophrenic, like in the sense I don't manage separate personalities for this.
Yeah.
It's still me, and I think that thing comes through regardless. Of course, there'll be a big difference between my design work and my artwork simply because the design rests so much on the person who wanted it. There will be, of course, difference. But I think you'll be able to see that it's the same set of eyes that are at work. That there's a certain kind of way of seeing that'll come through. So I feel like they're connected, despite the mediums being very, very different. But I have, even if you just see my art, you'll see that there are a couple of styles that are very, very different. Stylistically, they're very different. But they all kind of rest on visual material that comes from a different time. I like making work look like that comes from a different time, that it's not contemporary. It's something else, like it's from a different time. So obviously that still connects all of them. So there will be a similarity. There'll be something that connects them,
And the story that happens around the art, does the story come in first, or the art comes in first and then the story comes?
Usually the story.
Okay.
Usually the story becomes compelling and that becomes interesting, and then the art kind of comes from the story. But sometimes it kind of happens sort of together. And I'll want to draw a goddess, for instance, and there'll be so much material in my head about that goddess. So I'll just sort of draw, and then I'll start looking at the stories around her, and there'll be so many correlations that I realize that, these stories were there in my head already somehow, maybe, or there's the bits of it in my mind, so that sometimes it happens together. But usually there's a certain amount of information I have that allows me to draw. But the articulation of that story might happen after. I might sit down and, when I remember somebody asked me, how was your trip to somewhere? And I'd just come back. And I said, the story hasn't formed yet.
Right.
The trip has happened, but the story might happen a little later, right? Because I like the story. I like how I'm going to tell you what happened on that trip, right? So sometimes with art, it's like that, where I might create the story after. But that creation of the story is a different act from that story existing in my mind already.
How did Sister
Misfortune,
how did that happen? Did the whole concept just come to you? Was it planned?
I think it came in bits and pieces. I was not in the country. I was not in India at the time. I was in the Philippines. And there was a lot of kind of a need to express my cultural background, because I was in a completely different space. And so much of us is contextual. Our sense of humor is contextual. Who we are in every way, right? So I felt this need to be able to discuss a lot of stuff about India, about my culture. And the thing about India, which I found very fascinating, is the duality. That, like, for instance, in this particular situation, how women can be treated as badly as they are, while they can also be huge female figures in mythology and religion that you really, really look up to. And still, like, we can have women in extremely educated positions. For instance, have a prime minister, a female prime minister. That hasn't happened in many other countries. A lot of top financial jobs are held by women. They do the work, they study, top jobs in the science field as well. So they do the work, they get there. It's not like in many other countries, there is a boys' club that definitely guards it, right? Especially, say, in the financial world. But over here, there is that opportunity to just be studious, get your way and study and get there, right? There is that. On the other hand, there are so many examples of women just not being able to get an education at all, or being able to, they get an education, but at the end of it, you're getting married and, that's that, like,
That's a job.
That's a job. Like, nothing else is going to come from this, right? All of these things are true here, right? And I felt like these kind of things, which are vague ideas, I could tell all these things through these mythological stories in a way that, because I kind of felt like that's an avenue that kind of allowed for this. But that story has changed over time, because now for me, I feel like stories around female mythologies and all of that is kind of important because they're more closely knit to nature, which we have come so far away from, that we're so removed from nature now that I feel like there is something important about going back to those old stories that tied us to nature. And, that link to me is an urgent message, right? That we are connected in a way that is crucial to our own existence, right? Like as human beings, for us to be able to go on surviving on this planet, we have to make better choices regarding nature and all, like environmental choices, all of that. So those things, again, feed into the same narrative that I have been talking about. So, a lot of things that I want to talk about come into this, right? And female mythologies have allowed for me to be able to talk about those things and about gender, for instance, even though it's one thing about these. And there, for instance, that a lot of the stories that I talk from are stories that are not written. They come from oral cultures. They're performed, they're sung, they're told under trees, right? They're like little things that happen around the country, small tellings, small variations of the same story, right? And those are the ones that interest me because they talk about a diversity, right? And to me, that diversity is so crucial because, that means that our religion is not a monolith. It's not a single thing. It's multiple things. It's different things. And it's so key for us to maintain that thing because otherwise I think there is always a need for everything to become one, right? Like a monolith, like you want it to become one God, one this, one that. But I feel like discord in the ranks, I feel like that's a good thing. Like, have many people who believe in many different things. And then I feel like a healthy society comes from that,
I could be wrong when saying this, but I think System is Fortune is probably one of your most popularly known work. There are many more, but this is probably moved beyond just what it started with. But why did you choose mythology as a form of expression? Could this have been done in any other way?
I'm sure there might have been other ways to do it. But I think I chose mythology because I like that idea of using something to say the opposite. Like, for instance, religion and mythology is used to confine people, to tell you how to behave, how to do. And it's always kind of been there with creation of laws, for instance. Like, it's been there. It's something that puts structure into the world. But I like the idea of using the same thing, but to kind of talk of liberation, talk about the opposite, because those are also there in those stories. Those elements are also there. The opposite is also there. So for me, it became important to use that tool to tell the opposite thing, because otherwise we only look at it as religion or mythology means culture, which means we have to do certain things in a certain way because that's how it is done, period. But then when you go into it, you realize actually, even within this, there are people who do it differently. They're like, something is very different. Like for this bunch of people who are also under the same God, but they behave entirely differently. They eat differently. They live differently. A whole different set of things are important to them, right? And to me, that's great, And then I think mythology has that ability to that I can feed off, that I can use the same tool but in the opposite. For instance, like there is this predominant thing about women when I was growing up, at least, where there's the good girl and the bad girl, and then the good girl, you have to be Devi-like, which means you have to be these strict notions of goodness that exist.
Format that you had to kind of
follow. Format that you had to keep to, right? Because otherwise you are whatever, So it's like, this idea of the Devi is like so confined. So for me, the journey was really looking into the mythologies to see how the Devis are like us. The opposite story is true also. They're very human.
Yeah.
They have human concerns. They want certain things the way we want certain things, So it becomes, so I felt like the opposite is even more fascinating. So that twist or that change is possible through mythology and telling stories of gods and goddesses. Yeah.
The reason why I asked that is because in today's time, where beliefs and ideology is so strong, and maybe mythology and religion, I mean, they are the same, but they're seen differently. And it's a very strong perspective that you put across the Lakshmi, Alakshmi, and the duality of the same goddess, where the good is also there and the bad is also there. And when we look at it from a individual, from a human perspective, a lot of people, let's say my own example, a lot of people will know me as a good guy. But the same guy, when he's in a different space, a different time, And if if I have done something which probably is not good for the people around or in their head, I am labeled as a bad guy. And they both exist. They both exist at the same time frame in two different people's heads. They both exist in the same person at the same time. But what chose to come out was something that the circumstance drove it. When you took the step and the bold step of representing mythology the way you did, or religion the way you did, because I find it as a very, very bold move, especially in today's time when there's so much of backlash and all of that happening. I think it was a great, great thing. So, but why choose only Devis and not any other form of gods?
For instance, one thing is that the male perspective is looked at as the human condition, right?
That's the normal.
That's the normal. While the female perspective is looked at the female perspective, like it's the other, right? For me, first of all, I don't think so. I think we all feed into a human condition, male, female, whatever. They all feed into this overall thing. So our perspectives can be different. They can come from wherever. Our choices to draw gods or goddesses is precisely that we come from our perspective, right? That we will draw from where we come from, right? I mean, I can still choose but to draw gods, and I do once in a while, but my perspective is going to come from here because there is no standard that I should stick to.
Yeah.
It's not like I have to draw gods to be accepted. It's not. Somebody will draw.
Yeah.
Please help yourself, right? But it's like, because I was actually attacked for it once, by the way, where it was just like, why don't you draw? Right? And it was really kind of, people were offended about it. And I was like, please, everybody draw exactly what you want to. That's totally fine. It's only going to be that we're going to be true to our perspective. We're going to come from our, multiple thing. So it's not so much about, it is a choice. You're right. It's not like, I just happen to not draw gods. No, it's not. It's very definitely a choice to draw female goddesses. So on one hand, it can just be my perspective, right? But it just so happens that whatever I want to talk about kind of aligns up with goddesses more than gods. It just so happens but it would, because I come from that perspective. Like it would be that, right? Like, for instance, a black writer was asked whether she will, and she's a fiction writer, whether she will write about white people. And then she was like, that is not the standard. We don't have to write about white people. We definitely don't. We can write from our perspective. We don't have to write about somebody else. Like as brown people, if we lived in the West, I'm sure that question would come our way saying, are you going to write about white people? We're like, why would we write about white people? Like, why is that the standard? Right. So in that sense, I feel like that overall human experience so far, yes, has rested on the male perspective simply because that's how things have been. But to come from the female perspective is part of that human experience. It is going to be. It is not outside of that. It will be, right? So it's like, when you can see the goddesses and see how much of you is within that goddess, then it's part of the human experience, right? But if you feel like, okay, that's the female perspective and I really can't be a part of that, then there's a choice to be outside of that. But these stories are for all of us, actually. And, and I'm like, when we do the readings, you'll see that gender does play a role, but also doesn't in a way, So then gender becomes a kind of an interesting thing about how much of us is female and male, right? Like I do relate to certain things about male gods. I really do. And that's the part of me that will always relate to that, So I think that's how it is. Like, so the choice to draw goddesses is definitely a choice. It's not accidental. I've chosen to do that. Also, the other thing is that this whole journey going back to nature, right? That is driven by female goddesses. Like, for instance, Kali, she comes from the forest. She's a forest goddess, wild in the forest, versus turning skyward towards Indra, going away from the forest, going away from the reality of things and looking skyward towards other gods. They tend to be male gods, right? The journey that Lakshmi took from the world to go to the heavens to then be a god, right? That was a move that took you away from nature to then be a skyward god-like. And that action of going skyward to find gods was a male perspective, because the female gods were in forests. They were in, having children, taking care of animals, being protectors of forests and lakes and rivers. They were here, right? And the preoccupation with going skyward to look for a god there was a male perspective. And that action of looking skyward is obviously part of the human experience too, right? We've done it in different ways.
Mm.
Everybody has done it in different ways. Now we definitely are driven to go to other planets. This is that part of that same journey of looking skyward. And there's an opposite thing, which is looking at exactly what's around you and the importance of that. So that is kind of tied up with female gods in that way. But this is such a later perspective, this now. But obviously this in some way was playing on my mind from the beginning. So
what kind of research goes behind doing all of this? Because I mean, you've done the series on so many of the goddesses. Half of them I'd never even heard of.
yeah, I know.
What kind
You
of
and I had it, by the way.
what kind of research do you do? I mean, is there any research? Do these goddesses come to you? I mean, how is it? What happens behind the scenes?
Like actually, as time passes, what happens is people do tell me about goddesses. Like when they hear of a goddess, they'll be like, "Oh, I got to tell you about this goddess," and they'll tell me, and I'm like, "Wow, that goddess exists." Like I recently found out just a few months ago about a forest goddess who is shown as a tiger. I had no idea she existed. She exists. Okay, so things like that are going to happen. I'm going to keep getting information, but the research goes into it. I know of a goddess, then I'll try finding out more about the community that the goddess is important to. And what's important is finding as many goddesses who are different to different communities, important to different communities. So that's the point, right? So then I find these goddesses who are important to different communities, who are then I have to access information about them. And there is information. That's what's amazing. The information exists. So there's a good amount of research that goes into it. Talking to the right people sometimes, talking to the right communities at sometimes, or just getting the right translations of performances or even translations of scriptures, and also certain temples that are dedicated to certain gods. Like the Shiva piece is built around him changing gender, right? So there is a god, there's a temple for that. So I realized, okay, that temple exists. Gopeshwar temple exists. So I was like, okay, then what's the story? So, the research is kind of complicated that way. You find that these stories exist because the research has existed, and I kind of tap into the research.
When you do all of this research, in the head, as a human being, we kind of create a picture of something in our head, and it can get very technical at times. Like, let's say goddess Lakshmi is all about money, and there's a color associated to her. There is a character associated to her, and there's a whole lot of things that goes around her family, her children, the space that she is in. So when you draw, when you're painting, is there a restriction in your head because of the research that you have done? If there is, how do you tend to break that and get away from it? Or does the art piece, the colors, the form, the animal, or anything that goes into the painting, is there a reason around everything, or is it's an art?
So there tends to be a reason around everything. There is, and usually it tends to be a reason that people have forgotten exists. Like for instance, Lakshmi particularly, I drew dark, right? And I know that a lot of people had issues with that, and they had issues with me making all my goddesses brown. But so there was a lot of kind of backlash about a very small weird thing like that. Like everything else they were fine with, but they were just like, why is she dark? Like, why have you drawn her dark, right? And it really bothered people.
It came from people.
Yeah. And I was like, I think it's really important to draw her dark, considering how uncomfortable all of you are about a dark goddess, right? Why are we so uncomfortable about being dark in this country? Like, obviously this is an issue. And to me, it's a ridiculous issue. We live in a tropical country. Of course, the sun is going to affect our, melatonin. Let's come on, get real about this. So, at a basic level, to me, it's just ridiculous. But on the other hand, the fact that Lakshmi came from the world of the Asuras, which are now deemed like to be little monsters, right? They're like little devils, right? But that wasn't the case. The Asuras were also children of Brahma, and they were also just a different form. They held wealth versus gods releasing wealth from them to us. So obviously we took the side of gods, right? And but the Asuras themselves are also, there are extremely interesting Asuras who do extremely interesting things. And to me, then making Lakshmi dark was important because we have to remember this past of hers, right? Because then it tells us so much about where we come from, right? About why do we have an issue with our own pasts? So in that way, little element like the skin color becomes a thing. But then on the other, the sari she wears will be a certain color versus the sari Saraswati wears will be a different color. And I keep with that because I feel like there are certain things I want to stick to because I still need this to come through. I still need this to be part of a larger iconography that the goddesses belong to. So, for instance, just this morning, I was having a conversation with a friend and she was talking about Saraswati. And, she said, actually, Saraswati is with the swan because I'd say Saraswati is with the peacock. And then, and then I said, actually, there are lots of art around Saraswati with the peacock. We just don't know about that enough, right? So then we, like little things like this add to how what we think of as one thing is not one thing. It's so many different things, right? And then that big thing becomes so important to tell then, right? For instance, with Shiva becoming Gopeshwar, Shiva becoming a Gopika, right? And so with him doing that, right? You feel like there's that whole layer to Shiva, which is so beautiful that we should never have to shy away from it. Like, why? He was so comfortable that he didn't think his masculinity was stressed out one bit by this action, that he was so secure in himself. Feel like, surely that's a great story to tell. Surely we should not have to shy away from that. So then it becomes important to stick with an iconography, but then also kind of push it and show them in different ways because and why Shiva, I drew Shiva as the way I did was because the story behind it was also really wonderful because it's so light. Shiva from Kailas heard Krishna playing the flute in a garden in Vrindavan, and then he wanted to go and dance there because it was so beautiful. And Shiva is the god of dance. He is the Tandav, right? Like him going and dancing is surely wonderful. But it was all women around Krishna. You couldn't go in there as a man. So, and he had this long-standing relationship with Yamuna through the death of his first wife, Sati. Yamuna is a dark goddess because a dark river because she took his pain, right? And she turned dark because in that area, Yamuna is the darkest river. So she had this relationship with Yamuna. So he went into the Yamuna, came out as a beautiful woman, and he went in and he danced. And story goes that Radha was a bit kind of like, who's she now suddenly, And then and Krishna, of course, saw through exactly who it was. And then Radha asked Krishna, who is that? And does she have to be here? Because she was so wonderful at dancing that she kind of threatened everyone else. And Krishna says, that's actually my dance teacher, right? So the idea that Krishna learned to dance from Shiva is such a wonderful layer, right? And it's like, that's my dance teacher. Wouldn't want me to ask my dance teacher to leave, would you? And then Radha's like, no, because that's a teacher-student relationship and she's not threatened anymore at all. And they all danced, right? And to me, this story is so important while it is so light. Like, it's like a story of no consequence, like in some ways, but a story fully filled with consequence because of how the gods decided to behave, right?
If I'm a doctor, if I am in the hospital, I'm playing the doctor's role. When I'm back home, yes, the doctor's there, but it's not there. It's there, but it's not there. But for an artist, it's not that. Everything, it's constantly, the thing keeps running in your head all the time. So you don't, an artist, no, I'm not saying that they do or do not take breaks, but the existence is always there. So on a regular day, how do you deal with that?
Where is that line between art and artist, right? So as an artist, if you mess up on ethical grounds, let's say, right, it is part of your art. Like in the sense, like, the creation of art is tied up with the human being you are as well, for instance, right? In many ways, that can happen a lot more with an artist, that who we are is so much part of our, let's say, like an artist who was part of some kind of dictatorship. And that artist kind of functioned within the dictatorship and did a certain thing. But that also meant that he was or she was loyal to the dictator, let's say, right? Then the artist and the art is very close because your loyalty towards the dictator is very closely linked with the art that you created, right? So in that way, that artist and art line is so blurry, right? And on the other hand, the practicality of what you were talking about, which is it's going to take me half an hour of sitting there and doing it, but it takes around 3 hours of mental working out of what I want to put on it. Right. So it's like hours of thinking of it and actually what actually happens. So the practicality of that. So what I do to aid this process, I treat my working hours and I try to stick with this. But of course, the flexibility helps also. Like I can totally do weekday lunch with a friend. I exploit that because what's the point otherwise? Right. So, but otherwise, I try and stick to some kind of structure because I also live and paint in the same place, which is even harder. Right. I'm not going away somewhere where my mind can shift. I do everything in the same place. So I give myself time and say, this much time, you do this. That's it. You can sit and think if you want, but sit here and think. Like in the sense, like you have to do this, right? So in that way, there is a lot of time that it's just in my mind and all of that is happening, but the process of creation is slotted. And ever since I've done that, I have gained so much freedom in my life because I allow myself to then switch off also. That I'll not think of this. I will watch a movie or do whatever else, right? And be able to take a walk without feeling guilty, be able to do anything else without feeling guilt of saying, oh, I'm not painting, because that's the worst thing about this, right? You are stuck with your boss all day. You can't get away from this boss, right? Who'll just be like, you're not working, constantly. And that guilt is exhausting. I got tired of it. And I'd be working so many hours every day. And at the end of it, I'd be like, you've done nothing, and that horrible. And then I said, no, I've got to slot this just for my own peace of mind and be able to say, and also get some idea of how much time is going into this work. How much time? It's nice to know. It can be how many hours, it can be a month. That's fine. It's nice to know, just so that I can do other things in my life, because the other things I do in my life is what feeds the art. So I can't starve myself of everything else because I have to sit and produce, right? So, but this is all recent. Actually, post-COVID, as recent as that, because I felt like I don't want to live with that kind of constant, feeling of not working while one is working, So I have a very practical side to that and I follow that, which is, yes, you're an artist all the time, but I can schedule my production time where I'm going to produce something to certain slots. Yes, I'm thinking about it all the time after that. Yes, I'm doing other stuff. My brain is not switched off. All those things are true also, but still it makes a difference, versus saying, it's okay, I'll think about it today. It's too exhausting.
While growing up, I've seen so many movies on artists. Now, I am unable to define out for myself whether it's the passion that they're trying to show or the obsession they're trying to show. Can you keep the difference between
passion and
obsession, or how does one even
see, I think this is quite telling that I can't tell actually. They're like, passion, obsession, same. I'm thinking in my head right now.
Somebody distinguish that for me. I mean, like the first thing is like, okay, before you take the question, Smoke, can you draw the line between?
Yeah.
Tell me which is what.
Passion and obsession. I honestly can't draw the line that well. I think it's a line somebody else has to draw for you, saying, I think you need a break, or I think this is eating you up completely. I think you've lost perspective. I think you're too close to this. Go look at something else for a while. All of that usually is nicer. It's easier when it comes from outside. But I think over time, you can also learn to be able to do that yourself. But I think, artists function in different ways. There are some people who don't function like that. They're just in that. But with the way things are, for instance, other female artists that I know will also still have to continue being mothers or continue having to do a lot of other things which are practical, and you can't stop those things. So this ability to compartmentalize is stronger, right? And that's a thing. Versus artists who don't need to compartmentalize, they won't. They just will be. So I feel like that's the difference. It's like, some need to compartmentalize will draw those lines. And if you don't have the need to compartmentalize, it won't. I compartmentalize regardless of need or not. Like for my own sanity, I compartmentalize. But despite all the care I've taken, it still happens where, I can't stop thinking about something. It's too close. And when I have to, and now I write a lot as well. And writing is really so much harder. There is so much anxiety in me when I get there, and even with creation of art, sometimes like there's anxiety about getting it wrong. There's anxiety about, I need to get this right. I need to, so there is that I'm so kind of involved in it that I don't have the simple perspective that I've done this before. I'll do it again. It's all right. Maybe I'll fail a couple of times, but I'll do it. I'll do something, right? So I sometimes won't have that perspective. I'll just feel like, I don't know how I'll pull this off. I have to pull this off. I'm just going in a complete identity crisis. I don't know why I think I can make the stuff. I actually can't. I'm just, that kind of imposter syndrome, all of that, everything at one shot, right? So all that happens still. But I think with age, I've gotten better with obsession and thing. Because that obsession is that passion obsession. I think the obsession is that it can be negative in a way, that it can be a hindrance. But it can also be something that pushes you further, where you feel like, I got to crack this. I know this is hard, but I have to do it.
Isn't a part of being passionate also come with a bit of, if not more, at least a dash of obsession in it?
Yeah.
Because you're toying with a certain thing in your mind constantly. It's so much you.
Yeah. And that need to get that communication right. Because with somebody like me, I'm not somebody who's like, well, the art will talk for itself. Somebody can either feel one way about it or another way about it. It's what you make of your art. It depends on what you think of my art. All that is true also. But I'm very keen that you think about my art in a certain way, that my point comes through to you.
Mm-hmm. We spoke about gods and goddesses. Similarly, we have a man artist or a male artist and a women artist. Is life different for both of them as an artist, or is it the same for both?
I think that goes over time. In the sense, I think it's been a changing landscape. For instance, like if you look at a lot of male artists, they will have vibes of female artists, but there wouldn't be that much production of art because primarily they're taking care of children and all of that, right? So that landscape, but that landscape in many ways is changing in the sense that responsibilities are different. Especially when I see younger artists, I see that responsibilities are not the same anymore. They both share responsibilities. There's a very different way that people are living now that allows for this to happen. Yes, there's just a number of roles that like I can talk about women because that's where I come from, that as a woman you're supposed to perform, right? But on the other hand, for instance, for a man to do something like art is actually quite challenging because he is by default the bread earner. So you can't just go and become an artist. Very hard. But if a woman decides to do art, she's not going to have that many obstacles in her way because if you like, chalo, she'll just be at home anyway and she can do some art also. It's all right. Right? So the obstacles are lesser maybe because the need to make money was resting on the man. So in that sense, for a man to become an artist and kind of dwell in it, that was tough. For instance, I know that in my family, if a man decided to become an artist, he would have a lot more trouble than if a woman decided to become an artist. Because it was like, it's okay, she's not going to make money also, it's okay, somebody will be taking care of her. It's fine, right? So there is that thing. So it's much harder for a man in that sense because he has to make that work, right? But on the other hand, as a woman, to be able to be an artist is a different set of obstacles because there are all these other things you're supposed to do. And that'll really kind of stand in the way of sitting around and thinking, which doesn't look like work, And so it becomes very difficult to do that also. Like I remember somebody was talking about this, where even in my family, it was like, you weren't allowed to look relaxed if you're a woman, like in a sense, because you had to look busy in the house all the time, right? So for instance, sitting around and reading a book is crazy. And imagine sitting around and thinking because you're going to do painting later. No way, right? Like, so the obstacles are different and the things that you have to do to be part of life are so many that I think the challenges are different, but there are challenges regardless of where you come from. But I can speak from the female perspective and I can tell you that one of the biggest challenges is simply because of the number of roles you have to play.
Okay. The part that I wanted to inquire is the aspect that comes out. One curiosity I had before I get into that is, what happened to theatre?
I chose art. That's what happened to theatre.
Right.
Honestly, I think it came down to that.
Right. Okay.
You know.
But the intrigue for that as an art form continues.
I mean, I love theater as a consumer now. I really do. I think it's a fantastic. And the storytelling thing that I do with the tarot cards was essentially a performance piece. So where I would tell the stories, and it's kind of performative because I'm telling a story. And now performance pieces are so varied, like a lot of things are part of this world of performance. So I feel like there is a part of that theatrical sense that has stayed in me, and it's kind of acting out. It's finding its voice finally through the storytelling thing of me. So I think maybe that's what that is. Like, that's how it finally happened.
I can inquire that because in our conversation, I was like, at some point of time, this was something that was coming out of her, right? And then we spoke about art and design and this, and like, what happened to that?
Yeah,
that little child that was there.
Yeah. I think that that theater thing still found its way through my storytelling, maybe.
See, everybody evolves, right?
Everybody evolves.
Evolves. I mean, whatever is a belief, and one can also endorse that belief with reality that if you continue to practice something, throwing a stone or a pebble and making it jump across a still river, if you continue to practice that, you'll get better at it.
Yeah.
I mean, same as with art or anything that you continue to do. It's also passion of doing something. But since our expressions are so interwoven, especially with something like art, and we also spoke about this some time ago, that it's not possible to extrapolate me and what is coming out of me, right? And it's difficult to say which comes first. It's very symbiotic. It's interwoven.
Yeah.
You pull this thread and the other thread also will come out from there, kind of a thing. When a person meets you, right, you're a great storyteller. You take a person through, there's a lot of feeling, that one gets to interact with, right? There's a lot of heart. There's full gaddi-biddy ice cream in Bangalore terms served, right? At the same time, there's a lot of composure about who you are as well. You're not losing your shit ever, but I'm sure you do.
Yeah. I totally do, yeah.
Right? How does losing your shit or things that are unwanted in life, trials, tribulations, pain, hurt, betrayal, brokenness,
Yeah.
it is not coming out in your composure for sure. It must be finding expression. Either it's breaking you within if you've stored it, or it'll need to find expression. Where in your life has it found expression?
I mean, I think like right now, this scenario is very different from, let's say, if it wasn't the podcast, right? Like just as simple as that. But for instance, if you say, talk to my friends who I do spend time with, extensive amounts of time with, they will tell you I'm angry. They'll tell you that I can lose my mind about something if I'm passionate about it. And I will be harsh and I will be cruel about it. And it'll come out, yeah. I'm human. Like, I don't think we're all above that. I think there are people who are above it, and I'm just very happy for them, because that's a wonderful journey to have gotten there. And I would love to get there. But it's, on one hand, anger can be something that is so kind of puts you in a position where either you really mess things up or you can fix things because you're driven enough because you want to fix it, right? And those things can come from anger, sadness about how the world is. And it happens so often, you get online and a piece of news comes to you, which is just appalling, right? I have no way of keeping composure when I see that. Like, I am appalled by it. It's I'm so angry or so sad, or just, and I would want that to be less because it's just so painful. So all of that happens. All of it happens. And I think over time, because that anger finds a way of communicating, or I find a way that I need to be able to address this issue, and I really need to succeed in communicating about it, or whatever it is, and whatever that might be. I'll finally get there. But I think it comes from intensely feeling about it first. And when intensely feeling about it is usually sadness or anger or just discontent of how things are, and feel like, I think it does come from there. And there is anger and sadness there, without a doubt. I'm not showing it now, but there is. There always is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I kind of take that for granted. That has to be, because
Yeah.
otherwise you can't be passionate. I think this was a meme that I read somewhere saying that AI can't create art because it can't be jealous and horny.
Yeah. Definitely can't be a great artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. So it's crazy. Yeah. I think it's all of that. And you have to
Right?
go through a point of just utter despair, to be able to get out of it.
It's in some sense an artist's or a creative person's. I mean, one of the things that I think is an advantage for a creative individual is, by virtue of choosing a creative life, they have a way to acknowledge all of this and deal with it as well. Some needs dealing, some needs acknowledgement, acceptance. I don't know. I mean, that's in the domain of psychology, so to say. But it finds expression in the medium that they choose. Right? If I talk about myself, I have seen myself randomly have bursts of writing stories. And incidentally, there's a story that could have been in my life 30 years ago, embedded somewhere, but it found that moment to come out of me and put it down, right? And very weird in some sense. And then there is relief after that, because it's found.
Yeah.
There's this sense of,
yeah.
I may not be able to connect the dots, but that relief is there after it manifests.
Like they say about it, they say that to writers, right? There's a book in you. It has to come out, right? So I think it's that. And there's that release once it's out.
Yeah. What do you do when you have that release? Party, or you party before that?
I don't party. Not then. Weirdly enough. I've earned a break. That's how I feel. I feel like, I've definitely earned a break. I give myself a break. But usually that break is doing nothing. Like that's my go-to at that time. Yeah. I must say, I don't celebrate or party. Weirdly enough, that doesn't happen.
Right.
I don't know why. It doesn't.
That's okay. That's you.
I just I allow myself to just calm down. I
now
can't
you
think of
can.
I can't think of then getting up and having fun. It's too much work at that time. Yeah.
There's a cliche as well. It's like a stereotype in some sense, wherein especially artists, not creative fields by and large, but especially artists, people feel art and financial abundance are not married. It requires a stroke of luck for you to become that artist whose painting will be bought for $1 million. What's your take on it?
The reality, in many ways, right? In the sense that with art, at least, it's kind of the naked truth that, that this is going to be hard. You either make it or you don't make it. Well, actually, there are many grays in between. There are lots of different things. It's not that you're going to be that rich or that poor as the two options. No, there are lots of grades. That's one thing. But if you look at it, for instance, that kind of tokenizing happens in every field, in many fields at least. But over there, because we know that there are a lot of in-between stops, we feel a little safe saying, it's okay if I don't completely succeed and my business doesn't become the one business in the world. It'll just be at least one of many businesses. And, and you've seen examples, the small shops still surviving. You feel like, okay, it's all right. I still be okay, right? So I feel like with a lot of things, it's like that, where you can see enough in-between stops. I think they exist for art too. There are lots of, it's not just absolute insane wealth or nothing at all. It's not. Those are not the two extremes. There are many, many, many grades. It's just that I think artists may just really be bad of managing their money. So I feel like you could, I think that might be part of the problem, that even if you do get money, the chances are that, you haven't figured your way around maintaining that money or, making right choices post that money, right? So I think this might be more reflective of that than not making money at all. But also the thing is, I feel like you get into art and it's like getting into films and thinking, I'm going to be the most famous actor ever, versus kind of doing different roles and, being a different kind of actor and doing different things with acting. There are like a lot of other stops. But if you kind of think of art as that one stop, saying that's what I want to do with my art, then yeah, no, that's an absurd thing to want. That there isn't one final destination in art. There are going to be many destinations, and they're all going to be interesting and important destinations,
Right.
and they're all going to have their own problems. Like if you feel like you're going to be a financially sustainable artist and that was it, that you're going to be fine. No, there'll be a whole set of other problems when that starts, right? Like, with, for instance, you create one kind of art and that's working and now that's selling, and then you continue creating that art for your own reasons, maybe because it sells, or but also because it works, and also because you like doing it, whatever. You could be judged for those reasons. You could be like, oh my God, am I ever going to create anything new? Is this it? Like, am I not going to have a second life until I die? Am I going to do this? Right? Like, and then you're tied up with financial, stability. So like, okay, if I want to branch away from this, am I willing to now risk it all again? Because, you already risked stuff to get there. And you feel like, am I going to risk it again? Right? And is life going to be kind to me again? Because all of it seems like chance also. Yes, it's hard work, but so much of it is, to me, chance. Like, my life, when I look at it and I think about all the things that happened, I feel like, my God, some of it was just chance. Like, I don't even know how that happened. So you don't feel like you can mess with that, like when a business does really well, see how superstitious people get immediately. They get superstitious like that. They're like, because there is that underlying feeling that I don't know how this happened. I don't want to mess with it. So, so I feel like financial thing is one aspect, but it's not the only aspect. It's an important aspect, but it's not the only thing.
I want to get into a space. This is probably my last point of inquiry, which is, even in this conversation, in a very, very fluid way, I feel, and I don't know about Rajesh, but I feel that you have a space within you which is spiritual.
Yeah.
You paint gods, but look for these unusual stories and interpretations of where they come from, and you have your own take to it. You don't seem to be religious. I don't know. You tell me. And it's an intersectionality of all of this mythology that you speak about, but you look for stories that actually exist. You find a way to connect to it that's real to you. So all of this is in some sense intersectional, is what I see. And you kind of fluidly carry this bag full of things and strut around, right? That's how you're living life.
Strut? Yeah.
Yeah, put another word to it. Sorry.
No, please. I strut. Let's go with that. Nobody's ever said that. I'm going to take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment. Yeah. I'm saying it as a compliment, right? And there's beauty in all of this, because at some level it's childlike. It's and at some level it's aspirational. At some level it's inspiring. At the other level it's also cheeky, for the lack of a better term. It's like, I'm cool enough to make fun of life, kind of an aspect to it. That's endearingly cheeky. But all of this put together, is it also dangerous?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me where.
I mean, it is because, like we were discussing this slightly earlier, that if I picked a thing like religion and mythology, I am kind of really walking a tightrope. Yeah. Because it's very easy to offend people. It's very easy because there are different tellings. So everybody's going to be like, my telling is the one, that other thing is not. And, it's like telling somebody what to eat. People take offense. You're like, no, I'll tell me what to eat. Right? Because religion and food and all of these things are so ingrained in us that we don't like when anybody tells us what to do in that area. Because it's cultural, it's other things, whatever. So in that way, it is dangerous, especially with the kind of climate that we are globally, where it's so like every voice is so shrill that you can't say one thing and not get into trouble for saying it. It's like, it's really, and now anything that you say can be placed out of context, put out there, and you can come across as anything anybody chooses you to come across as, right? So it's a dangerous world. If you're going to express yourself, you're in danger. I think there's no two ways about that. Absolutely. Okay. Now, and with somebody like me, I talk about mythology and I talk about these stories, but I can't be religious simply because of because I'm an artist. Because I'm an artist, I will by default be on the outskirts of society looking in. Being part of it is always going to be difficult for me, no matter what it is. This can be one aspect, but I'll always be out looking in many ways, no matter how much I am within it. But my place is always here, right? So it's very hard for me to be in it that way. Also, this is a choice I'm making, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And also because all of these other things, and religion included, tends to come in a certain way. Like I have it tends to come with too many middlemen, like in the sense, like too many people telling you what it is or how you're supposed to be, or like, it's just too many, right? And I feel like in that ritualization, in all these things, they have a role to play, right? For instance, I see certain rituals and I get it. I'm like, yes, I can see how that ritual has a role. But I've been to a funeral and I was looking at the rituals in the funeral and I was like, yeah, I get it. I can get why some of those rituals made sense in a certain way, because it's a complicated thing that we're being part of, where we are engaging with something like death, which is very, very complicated. And a ritual might find a way for us to engage with that. And in many different situations, I've seen that. And in the same situation, same rituals that I'm appalled by. I'm like, while a family is grieving, do they have to do this, right? So the same thing can have like different things at it, right? So it's very hard for me to 100% sign under anything, because I am going to always have this outsider perspective. I'm always going to be, but that is what my art is dependent on. That my outsider perspective can be maintained in some way, right? So
I'd like to just close it with just one last question. In today's time, I don't know if it's a wrong way of looking at it, but if an artist wanted to become a Leonardo or a Picasso, what would it take?
I think the path has changed. It has, in the sense, with the onset of social media and all of this, there is like so many new platforms that one can be seen. But still, there is the space of art, which is the gallery spaces, and spaces which are kind of which are curated, and so these spaces are very well guarded, because what comes through goes through a lot of checks, I suppose, or it has to speak to a bunch of people for it to happen. So, but that is one part. But then there are all these other platforms that one can express oneself in. But I feel like when you talk about somebody like Leonardo, what happens is that it's like talking about Shakespeare. They're like classical. And they're classical because they've survived all these years and they're still somehow relevant. So it's very hard to tell who now can be relevant in the future. It's a very difficult answer to, I don't have that perspective about how is one relevant today for it to make sense 100 years from now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, how do I stay relevant? That's a very difficult thing to answer. So in that way, I don't know. But I feel like the platform is constantly changing. And I feel like in our short lives, how much change we've seen, right? Like how, like our entire thing has changed. I have very clear memory of no internet. I have a very clear memory of, no phones. Where you have to call a friend and listen to, talk to their parents before you get to talk to them, right? Young kids today are just appalled by that. They're like, I call that landline and what if somebody else picks up? You're like, deal with it. Say hello and ask to speak to someone else. So it's like we've seen landscapes change. So for me, it's very hard to tell how one makes a mark today to be able to be great many, many, many years from now. But I feel like that is one thing that I would love, because I feel like to be able to make something timeless, in that sense, that to make something that is clearly going to be relevant regardless of a changing world, would be amazing. I just don't know how that would happen.
Thank you so much for doing this with us. I had a great time.
I had a lovely time. I always have a lovely time with her in a coffee conversation as well. So I look forward to it, and I think I'm going to connect with you again just to have a chat. But I wanted to ask you something. How did it feel like doing this with us?
This is really nice. This was me hanging out with friends. That's what this was. I don't think I was filtering too much. which is nice.
Right.
Because and I think I can only say that because it's over now. Because when I have to look back, I'm just like, I wasn't filtering. Because filtering is a very active role, right? I was definitely filtering in the beginning. And I think that went out the window very quickly because I completely got lost in our conversation. So I think that's always the best sign when I can't tell how
Right.
time has passed. And I think this is long, no? We've had a long chat.
Yeah.
I don't feel it at all. So this has been fantastic. I'm so glad we did this.
Sure.
Thank
you so much for
so much.
finding time for us. And we've been looking forward to this. We've had your name on the list for a while. But you're like, okay, let me reach out and just ask us.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. This is so
Thank you.
great. I'm just so glad you did. I don't know, you guys have left me inspired to do certain things. So that's amazing. That's really the nicest thing one can walk away with, right? Inspiration. So, and you guys have done that for me. So it's really nice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.